everybody. How's it going? Good morning. Last plenary, last day of a fantastic conference. I don't know about you guys, but I've had a killer time here in Cleveland. Special thanks to Climate Registry, TCR, Amy and Jennifer. You guys don't know how small this team is that pulled off such a big event. So thank you guys. What a cool place to be. So as mentioned, I am Bob Keefe. I'm the Executive Director of E2. If you've never heard of E2, that's okay. I'm going to tell you about it. We are a national organization of more than 10,000 business leaders who work or do business in just about every state and about every sector of the economy. And we advocate for policies that are good for our economy and good for our environment. So we've been talking the past few days, as Jennifer mentioned, about the economy, about the environment, about storytelling, about data, about innovation. What cool innovation we heard about last night and throughout the week. That was so neat to see those new companies coming up. So I'm here to try to figure out how to wrap all this together and leave you guys excited and celebrating, and by the way, taking all of this home with you and figuring out what the heck to do with it. Which is going to be fun. So let's see how I can do. First of all, show of hands. Raise your hand here if you care about the environment. Okay, keep those hands up, keep those hands up. Raise your hand if you care about the economy. All right, now wave them around like you're at a concert at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, because folks, I got to tell you, we got something to celebrate. Jennifer mentioned it. 21 months ago, we passed in this country the biggest and most important climate policy this planet has ever known, the Inflation Reduction Act. That sounds like hyperbole, but it really isn't, and I'll tell you why. Folks, I truly believe that because of that policy, because finally, we decided to do something about climate in America, we are at the advent of an economic revolution, the likes of which we haven't seen in generations. People have cautioned me about using that word revolution. Oh, Bob, you're getting too radical, whatever. But let me tell you why. Let me tell you why I think that's the case. Since the Inflation Reduction Act was passed 21 months ago, my organization has been tracking clean energy projects all around the country. What we now know is that there are more than 300 major clean energy projects, factories, coming up or announced all across America. We're talking about electric vehicle factories. We're talking about battery factories. We're talking about solar panel factories, wind turbines, offshore wind projects, onshore wind projects. 300 major projects, factories coming out of the ground. When is the last time we've seen that kind of innovation and that kind of investment in America? 300 projects, come on. More than $120 billion worth of private sector investment in these projects. Now, we're not talking about government loans, we're not talking about grants, we're talking about businesses that are putting their money into America and investing in these projects. More than 100,000 jobs have been announced. Did I mention this is just in the past 21 months? When is the last time we've seen something like that? That's why I think that's why I call this a business revolution. And by the way, it's happening in places that have been bypassed by previous economic transitions. Places like Licking County, Ohio. Any Ohioans in here? Anybody heard of Licking County? It's a real thing if you don't believe me, Licking County. Out in Licking County, a company named Illuminate is building a $600 million solar panel factory. Going to employ 1,000 people. Another company, First Solar, many of you know about First Solar. They're investing $3 billion into factories right here in Ohio to build more solar panels. A town called Jeffersonville, Ohio. Honda and LG are building a $4 billion factory to make electric vehicle batteries. And Honda is investing billions more into its plants here to use those batteries to build electric vehicles. Now, we know that we don't have enough chargers for all those vehicles right now, but guess what? Over in Columbus, there's a company called Star Charge, which is building a new factory that's going to churn out 20,000 EV chargers every single year. That's by the time that Honda and others get going on this. Over in Middletown, we're going to hear a little bit about Cleveland Cliffs, which is doing some really cool things with cleaning up its steel mill there, which we're going to hear about a little bit more. Folks, this is what an economic revolution looks like. And here's the thing, these projects, all of this stuff that they're building, these are giving us the tools that we need, finally giving us the tools that we need to do something about climate change. With these projects going, we're on the track to reduce our carbon emissions by about 40% by 2030. And we're building a cleaner economy while we're doing it. By the way, this isn't just happening in Ohio. These same types of stories are playing out all across the country. I don't know if, I can't remember if Jennifer mentioned it, but before I do the job I do now, I spent about 20 years as a journalist. And I covered everything from the rise of real estate in Florida to the banking boom in the Carolinas to then finally in Silicon Valley, the internet bust and boom again, the introduction of the iPhone that we all have in our pockets, those sorts of things. And I can tell you that the economic revolution we're seeing now is just about as big as all of those things. But when I say I was a journalist, I say that because I didn't really have any skills or smarts to get a real job. But I did know how to spot a good story every now and then, and I did know how to string a couple words together every now and then to do it. And when I saw what was happening with the Inflation Reduction Act all over the country, these projects in Ohio and Georgia and elsewhere, I decided to string a bunch of those words together. And 6 weeks ago, I released this book, Clean Economy Now, Stories from the Frontlines of an American Business Revolution. I gave a bunch of these away yesterday. I've got a bunch, not a bunch, I've got a few more out there I'm going to give away. If you care about this stuff and you want a copy, come see me after this and I'll give you one, because I think it's important to tell this story, to do the things that we were talking about here yesterday. Now, among the places that I went to when I was doing the reporting for this book was a little place called Dalton, Georgia. Anybody been to Dalton? 1, 2, okay, that's about right. That's not too many reasons to go to Dalton. But if you ever bought a piece of carpet, if you ever bought a piece of flooring, it probably came from Dalton, Georgia. Dalton, Georgia was the carpet capital of the world. Still is, but a lot less so than it used to be. Now, when I was in Dalton, I met a guy named Robert Howie. Robert's a cool guy. He's a short little guy, which means he's about my height. But he grew up in Dalton, and just like everybody who grew up in Dalton, Robert's daddy worked in carpet, his mama worked in carpet, his cousins worked in carpet. Everybody Robert knew worked in carpet, because that's what you do in Dalton, Georgia. Robert worked in carpet for a little bit and then realized pretty quickly he didn't want to work in carpet. Problem is, there wasn't a lot to do in Dalton, as I mentioned, so Robert went off and he joined the Navy, learned to be an electrician, got homesick after a couple of years and went back to Dalton. And fortunately by then, a Korean company called Keefe started building a solar panel factory. After the IRA was passed, it expanded that factory. It added another factory. It's building another factory right now. So Robert, now that he knew how to put wires together, and thanks to the Navy, went to Keefe and he got a job. And so when I met him there, I said, so Robert, you know, what did your old buddies down at the carpet mill say when you said you were going to work for a Korean company making solar panels in Dalton? And they said, oh man, they said, you'll be back. Everybody works in carpet. That solar stuff, that ain't going to last. That's crazy. You'll be back here just like the rest of us. And a few years later, Robert's still at Keefe. He has had several promotions. He's making more money than he ever made, more than he can make in carpet. He is moving up the company ladder, and he's working in a solid job in one of the fastest growing businesses in the world. And by the way, he's doing something good for the planet while he's doing it. So I asked Robert more recently, I said, hey, what are all your buddies down at the carpet factory saying now that you've been at Keefe for a couple of years? And he says, well, what they're saying is, how do I get a job over there? That's what an economic revolution looks like, folks. This is changing and bringing opportunities to places that didn't have it before. But here's the deal. Here's the problem. Not enough people know this is happening. I bet you guys didn't know all those stories I was just telling about these different projects going on. And if you don't, I guarantee your neighbor doesn't. I guarantee your crazy uncle who doesn't believe in climate change and thinks solar's for sissies doesn't know that. Not enough people know this is happening. If you look at the polling, AP came out with a poll a couple weeks ago. Only 40% of Americans said they've ever heard of the IRA. Only 20% of that say that they think it's been good for the economy. Did I mention there's 300 projects coming out of the ground in America, 100,000 jobs already announced? So as a result, because not enough people know about this, these policies are at risk. In the U.S. House, there's already been more than 30 attempts to roll back or reduce the IRA, the policy that's driving all of this stuff. Just today, actually, as we are speaking right now, Congress is debating whether to pull the IRA funding out of the Farm Bill. Funding that would aid in conservation, funding that would help farmers put solar panels on their fields and make a little more money. That's being debated right now. I don't know if you guys know this, but 6 months from now there's an election. And you know, the candidates for president have made it very clear on both sides where they stand on the IRA, what they think about electric vehicles and solar and wind, what they think about climate change. The crazy thing is there shouldn't be anything partisan or political about any of this. There's nothing partisan or political about creating jobs, driving economic growth, making America more competitive in what's expected to be a $23 trillion global marketplace. We didn't have this kind of politicization when Lincoln sent the railroads out west, or John Kennedy sent man to the moon, or Eisenhower did the Interstate Highway Act, but it's happening now, unfortunately. And the crazy thing is, these projects that I've been talking about, these 300, 60% of them are in Republican congressional districts. 70% of all those jobs announced are in Republican congressional districts. If you ever want to check this out, go to e2.org. On our homepage, there's a little button that says latest announcements. If you click there, you can see this by every state. And it's also in the book. So 60% of all announcements in Republican districts, 70% of all jobs announced in Republican districts, 85% of total investments announced by companies in GOP districts. There shouldn't be anything political about this. When I wrote the book, I asked somebody that we had worked with in California for a long time to do the forward for me. You may have heard of him, Arnold Schwarzenegger. He was the governor there for a while. He's done a couple other things, but he was the governor of California. But I wanted him to write the forward, not because necessarily who he was, but because of what he did. He was a Republican governor who passed the most important climate policies in the country at that time, with a Democratic legislature in the most democratic state in the country. There shouldn't be anything partisan about this stuff. Remember that Q-Cells factory, Robert Howey, my buddy? That happens to be in the district of, Dalton is in the district of a congresswoman you may have heard of, Marjorie Taylor Greene. She was there, she's been to the plant, she was at the ribbon cutting. Robert's got a picture with, he actually gave her the tour. So he's got a picture of it. So, you know, again, this should not be a political thing. But here's the thing. If you guys didn't know about some of these projects, if you guys didn't know about the scope and the scale of this, again, the people around you don't know it either. So here's my challenge to you. If you care about the economy, if you care about the environment, and I know you all do because you raised your hands and waved around like crazy people a few minutes ago. If you care about these things, if you want to keep this progress going, take what you learned here this week about innovation, about data, about storytelling, about the progress that we've been talking about, and help make sure more people know it's happening. Help tell these stories, share this data. You know, one of the things our members at E2 are starting to do is host these clean economy house parties or office parties where they just bring their neighbors together over a bottle of wine, or have a break in the lunchroom with their employees, or bring in their business partners, and they talk about what's happening at their company. what's happening in their business, their employer, and the economic growth that we're seeing because of these policies in their states and in their regions. I encourage you guys to do something similar. Tell your lawmakers, talk to your newspapers, or send a letter to your local newspaper. I was doing radio shows all this week here in Cleveland and in Ohio and elsewhere, talking about this. I hope you guys think about stuff like that too. Because that's what a revolution looks like, folks. That's how we build a cleaner economy. And if you don't know how to do that stuff, get engaged with E2, get involved with E2, get involved with TCR, get involved with BCSC, get involved with the myriad of fantastic climate and clean energy groups here in Ohio that hopefully you met some last night. I know I did, and the nights before. Whatever you do, help spread the word about this because it's important. We want to keep this progress going because you're all a part of it. And if we do that together, we can build a clean economy now, we can do something about climate change now, and we can leave a better future for ourselves and our children down the road. So listen, thanks everybody for taking time to listen to me a little bit. Really grateful for you sticking it out to the end. And I think with that, I'm going to bring back up Jennifer. Oh, Nick. Nick, that's your...
Thanks for bringing the energy and the optimism, Bob. That was great. I'm looking forward to checking out the book. And just as a reminder, Bob will be out in the hall with his book, so you can, after this plenary session, go and say hi. Up next, we have a one-on-one interview with Tracy Forrester, Executive Vice President, Environmental and Sustainability with Cleveland Cliffs. Tracy is in line to be the next president of the board of the Iron and Steel Technology Trade Organization that began in 1907. She'll be the first female to hold this position. Cleveland Cliffs is the largest flat-rolled steel company in North America and a leading supplier of automotive-grade steel. Today, we are excited to hear about their decarbonization journey with a specific focus on a recent grant from the Department of Energy to pursue 2 decarbonization initiatives at Middletown Works in Ohio and Butler Works in Pennsylvania. Facilitating this conversation is Amy Holm, Executive Director of the Climate Registry. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Tracy and Amy.
So Tracy, Bob got the audience warmed up for us. Excited to talk to you. Bob mentioned that his book is titled Clean Energy Now. I don't think he mentioned the subtitle is Stories from the Front Line of an American Business Revolution. So you and Cliff Steel are that's the story we're gonna focus on today. Because this is a story that you are living, and we're going to focus on that. And I can't wait to hear about all the details of what's going on, what you're doing. So first of all, Tracy, why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about your background, a little bit about the history of Cleveland Cliffs, and what your role with the company is.
Sure. So, Bob, thanks for your remarks. Thanks for putting your book out and getting the good news out. We are seeing a bit of a revolution. It's very exciting. Personally, at Cliffs, we have been through a major evolution. We are a 176-year-old mine operator, predominantly located, the iron ore comes out of the ground, naturally occurs along the Mesabi Range in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan and Minnesota. Been doing that for over 175 years. 4 years ago, we, amidst COVID, became a steel company. So we completely changed our focus. We basically bought our customers, AK Steel and the U.S. assets of ArcelorMittal, and then shortly after that acquired Ferrous Processing and Trading, a prime scrap processing company. And that converted us from being the sole supplier of the main feedstock to make steel to the actual steel maker, vertically integrated. So now we provide the iron ore pellets from up on the range. We have the ferrous scrap for the recycling and use in electric arc furnaces, as well as the pellets in our blast furnaces. And I would be really amiss if I didn't mention at the same time we finished construction of our $1 billion investment in Toledo, Ohio, where we built the hot briquetted iron facility or direct reduced facility and started production the end of 2020. So a lot happened in 2020. I have been with the company 20 years. Most of that time was in the legal department, worked on our growth and our as we had to right size a lot of the disposition of assets over the years, and then the growth into the steel. So I've seen us grow, contract, and grow, and we're very focused on staying and stabilizing the steel market. About 3 years ago, our CEO asked me to take on environmental and sustainability. So I transitioned from the legal department into business development, and now am the executive vice president, environmental and sustainability. So I've seen the company through a lot of change and very excited about the future. Hope I answered your question.
Absolutely. No, that's fabulous. Thank you. So I'm very interested to know, given this fairly recent vertical integration of your company, what has the path to decarbonization look like? It seems like that could be an opportunity and also challenging,
Very.
trying to tackle those two operation challenges at the same time. What did that look like, or how's that going?
It's going well. So I'll start on a positive note. We set a corporate commitment to reduce greenhouse gases, scope 1 and 2 absolute emissions by 25% from a 2017 baseline by 2030. Last year, we beat that target. And we did that by taking advantage of what we could action here and now, what was within our control. So being vertically integrated really opened up the opportunities for us. So we focused on, we were already focused on behaving and operating sustainably on the Iron Range. You have to, it's a natural resource. So we pride ourselves on being good stewards of the environment. If we weren't, we wouldn't have the permission to extract the ore. From there, we took a broad look at our footprint. And with the coming online of the hot briquetted iron plant in Toledo, we were able to combine the pellets and that HBI product from our Toledo plant in the blast furnaces and the basic oxygen furnaces. And lo and behold, using it that way, we were able to increase productivity, cut down our coke and coal rate, and through that productivity, we identified the highest emitting furnace in the footprint, and we made the tough decision to shut that down, as well as one of the not as well performing coke batteries. So it was through increased efficiencies, just being more productive and efficient, as well as shutting down some non-performing assets. And then it's just going after all of the other efficiencies that you can find, because you now control the whole footprint. And we could sort of pull those levers once we had that control.
Fabulous. And for us out-of-towners, Tracy, where is Cleveland Cliffs? Is it off in, industrial area someplace like 20 miles out of town or something?
Nope, we're probably less than 2 miles from where we sit right now.
2 miles?
We are, the city kind of grew up with the steel mill there.
Wow, and the skies are blue?
Thank you for noting that. Yes, very much so.
Is that all due to you? Do you take credit for all that?
Oh, I can't take credit for the weather. There are higher powers that are in charge of that. But we are, like I said, we pride ourselves on being good stewards of the environment. a big part of my day-to-day job is making sure that we are in perfect compliance with our permits. So I'm very happy to say that we are no longer that dirty, grungy steel mill. We're not your grandfather's steel mill. We are a modern, clean facility. We want to be the employer of choice. We are the employer of choice. We've been able to ramp up our hiring since taking control. We're now 28,000 people strong, mostly in the Great Lakes region across the Midwest. So the Cleveland Works plant, when you see the white, some people call it smoke, that's not correct. That is steam coming out of those stacks. I refer to them as our steam stacks. The flare that you see is a pollution control device. It's a safety valve and a pollution control device. And I'll give a plug, if you go to our corporate website, the American Alliance of Manufacturing just put out a wonderful video called Relighting the Flame, and it's all about the importance of that flame, especially to the steel workers. When they see that flame, they know steel is being made and they're making money, and it's good for the economy. So I'd like to put that positive story in your minds when you drive by the steel mill on your way back to home or to the airport. You will see us. We're there. We're open and notorious.
Fabulous. And we heard from Bob this morning. I think everybody raised their hand. Are they supporting the environment, and they're supporting a good economy too? So that flame is indicative of that.
Yes.
That nexus there. So that's exciting. We also heard from Bob about how federal funds are flowing to communities all across the United States and here to Cleveland too. So Cleveland Cliffs has recently been awarded a fairly sizable grant from U.S. Department of Energy. So please tell us about that, the grant and the projects, and we've also been talking about just the process of securing funding. The DOE has great grants of various sizes and to impact different sectors, but we have been talking a lot about just some of the challenges and opportunities accessing those funds.
Sure. So I would be remiss if I didn't mention a big part of our success in getting our emissions down and identifying operating efficiencies is the partnership we've had with the U.S. Department of Energy. We are a better plant partner, and we early on signed up for the Better Climate Challenge with the Department of Energy, which is an additional goal to reduce emissions and achieve operating efficiencies. So through that partnership, we are frequent flyers at the Department of Energy website, which is a plethora of information, knowledge, and toolkits, frankly. And also became very sensitized with the passing of the infrastructure law, that the bipartisan infrastructure law and the IRA, that money would be coming. And it was known that iron and steel is being targeted as a hard-to-abate sector, along with glass, cement, and a few other industries. So we have always collaborated with universities with a look to the future. We know blast furnaces are going to be around, but we recognize they're not always going to look the same. So we, in April, the Department of Energy put out a funding opportunity announcement geared toward advanced industrial demonstrations of lower carbon processes, ways to make iron and steel. So, well, that's perfect for us. Let's go for it. So we submitted 2 concept papers, and in April. In July, we heard back from the Department of Energy that they appreciated what we put in our concept paper. A concept paper is only 2 pages long, so you got to be really succinct and to the point in what you're going to do and propose to do. Then we were invited to submit a more fulsome application. I think that was in July. Shortly after that, we were then invited to go to Washington, D.C. and face a panel of DOE experts, and we were interviewed, grilled, so to speak, on our plans. What did it mean? How will you do that? It was very clear to me and the team that the Department of Energy wants to get the investments right. They want the money to go for the intended use. Yes, we are the winners of the opportunity to negotiate with the Department of Energy is where we are. We have not been granted the funds yet. We are award nominees, and I'm very proud to say that both of our concept papers got accepted. So it is not one, but 2 awards. I think the range of the money made available in the $6 billion funding opportunity announcement was anywhere from $35 million to $500 million. The Middletown project that we proposed and that we're now embarking on is a total cost of almost $2 billion. So we applied for the full $500 million, and the DOE came through and has awarded that. So it's astounding. These are big dollars. Thank you. So I'll pause there and let you ask some questions. I don't know if there was more, but I could go on.
No, wonderful. So you mentioned Middletown. So that's one of the projects I have in my notes. Butler Works is another
the other
one.
one,
So
yes.
could you do a little deeper dive into what those projects are and why they are critical to the kind of what you're doing and really the industrial bite of the U.S.?
Sure. So Middletown Works is an integrated steel mill. It's been around for over 100 years. Our product there is flat-rolled steel, primarily to the automotive industry. The project that we proposed there is to retrofit modernize the blast furnace. So in lieu of the existing blast furnace, we are proposing to build a direct reduced iron facility, just like the one that we built in Toledo. So we've de-risked it. We're going to use the same technology provider and contractors. So we've been through this, de-risked it, and we de-risk this project, sorry. We plan on the same setup. It will be a larger scale. That direct reduced iron unit will then feed 2 electric melters, and that will produce a liquid iron that then gets fed to the existing infrastructure, our basic oxygen furnace and the downstream finishing facilities that exist. So it's a really, I'd say, elegant technical solution that Middletown can continue to produce the steel that's needed by our economy and our customers. But we have the space there to begin construction, and hopefully by 2029, if all goes according to plan, we'll be turning on the new DRI unit and the 2 electric melters, and then eventually be shutting down the blast furnace end of that operation. So the beauty and the industrial might part, we will preserve the really well-paying union jobs there, about 2,500 people we currently employ. We propose that we'll add about 170 jobs, 1,200 additional during peak construction. We'll switch over to Butler, which is in Pennsylvania, just 30 miles north of Pittsburgh. Butler was on the brink of being closed when we acquired it, but we fought to keep it open. The important part about the Butler plant is it is the only steel mill in the United States that makes electrical steels, grain-oriented electrical steel. The importance of this is the kind of steel that goes inside the transformers. It's in your front yards in that box that we all try to cover up with shrubs or something, right? It's on the poles, but it is still a very important part of how we distribute and step up and step down power in this country. And if you're not aware, it's desperately in need of modernization, and we are unfortunately importing most of that steel from outside of this country. So Cliffs fought to keep that plant open. I won't say we fought, we advocated with the Department of Energy recently on a transformer efficiency standard that threatened the viability of that plant. The DOE listened to us and worked with us and revised the efficiency standards. So we are now actively reinvesting in the Butler plant. And the project that we've proposed there will make us more productive, far more lower carbon emissions, lower air and water emissions as well, or water consumption. There, we are proposing on replacing 2 natural gas-fired slab reheat furnaces. So we bring coils from Middletown to Butler, and then we reheat these slabs from, I forget the exact thickness, but to paper thin. And we're going to replace the natural gas reheat furnaces with 4 electrified reheat furnaces. So it'll be a cleaner, low-carbon steel, more importantly, low-carbon electrical steel that we can sell to the transformer producers right here in this country. So I see it as critical to national security, the economy, and again, there we're securing United Auto Worker jobs. I think that's 1,500 or almost 1,600 jobs that we've preserved there.
That is just wonderful news. I think the impact, you mentioned a number of co-impacts or co-benefits of these 2 projects, which really just will continue for years and be supporting not only, like you say, lower carbon steel, but also these communities that can have good jobs, good benefits, and help the U.S. industries as well. So would the Butler plant, I'm just trying to get a sense of the scale in terms of importing that type of steel for transformers from international markets. How much of an impact would that have cutting into, like not having to import that?
Oh, it would be tremendous because I think then you'll see the steel companies, you'll see Cliffs continue to invest in the production of grain-oriented electrical steels and work with the transformer manufacturers to boost production here in this country.
Domestically.
It will bolster the investment. Right now, if you don't have that market or the demand, you're not going to provide the supply.
Exactly.
It's kind of like the hydrogen economy and what the Department of Energy is trying to do there. And we stepped up and said, we'll be a major off-taker, bring it to us, we'll use it.
So it's just a first step to keep it
it's that
rolling.
first step. It's all about the inches to the miles to the,
Right.
exactly.
All right. I have some more questions, but Tracy's kind enough to be open to some questions and answers. So if you have any, would love to take those. Yes, right here in front. I think we have somebody with a mic. There you go.
Hi, how are you? Thank you. It's really exciting to hear what you're doing. Rick Saines, I'm with Pollination. I serve at the pleasure of Amy on the board of TCR. Can you speak a little bit about the change management issue with the workers in the plants? So you've had the successful experience, you said in Toledo, of changing over the technology. But I imagine for the folks that have been doing it for 100 years plus,
Right.
you know, that culture, new technology, new processing, new training. Some people who used to do the thing that's no longer being required either have to get retrained or whatever. Can you just kind of speak to that element of it? Because that feels like that could be part of the inertia issue we need to unlock.
I will just say the United Steelworkers is predominantly the union that represents most of our facilities, so I'll refer to them. It's also the machinists and the auto workers. Steelworkers in general are all for these changes. They want to make sure their jobs are around. We do operate 5 electric arc furnaces, but typically those are also referred to as mini mills. Typically the mini mill operations don't provide as many jobs, far less jobs. But we want to continue to run the integrated mills, and part of our application to the Department of Energy committed us to what we're already doing, which is training on new technologies. The steel industry has always done an excellent job of modernizing, upgrading, adopting new ways of doing things, primarily for safety reasons. These are dangerous conditions, but we have used technology and AI, whatnot, to make this a safer workplace. The steelworkers have adopted that. In many cases, they're the ones pushing for it. So I've had the opportunity to speak with their leadership and several of the folks on the floor. They are just happy to know that we plan on running these blast furnaces. They might look a little different. Every time we upgrade or have to do a major maintenance outage, it's to upgrade these furnaces and these operations. New pollution control devices, new technology, new monitor, new controls being put on them. So no, it looks like a rough and sturdy bunch that don't change, but they've come they teach us a lot. They teach me something every day. I don't think that's going to be an issue.
Any other questions? Oh, back there. Or what?
Should I just go ahead and ask it?
I can hear you.
Okay. So Tanya Peacock, and I'm with a company called Eco Engineers. Could you speak a little bit more about how you would incorporate hydrogen into your operations?
Sure. Hydrogen is a game changer for the steel industry. We use a lot of natural gas, and I see that as a good thing because it's readily available. And by optimizing the use of natural gas, we've been able to reduce our coke and coal rates. Now, why do I talk about natural gas? That we are used to using natural gas as a fuel. It will be an easy shift or blending in of the hydrogen as it becomes available. I think there are lessons to be learned in how to use that mass amount of hydrogen, but what we're doing to help drive the demand for more hydrogen, we invested $10 million in a pipeline at our Indiana Harbor No. 7 furnace in Indiana, so that when it is available, we can run it directly to the furnace and use it as a fuel source. We have run a number of trials over the course of last year. We got up to over 10% blend of the hydrogen with the natural gas. Basically, we couldn't do more because there wasn't enough hydrogen. And we're doing this with gray hydrogen because that's what's available. So yeah, the Toledo plant, the direct reduced plant there is hydrogen ready. So even though we finished that in 2020, we already had hydrogen in mind. So we have all of the fittings and valves to be able to get that up to at least a 30% rate, and then we'll have to spend a little bit more, but we're ready to take it when it's available and affordable. Everything has to be affordable, right? So we're ready there, we're ready at Indiana Harbor. The distinction there is IH7, that furnace is the largest in the Western Hemisphere. So that is a lot of hydrogen that will be needed. We can use it, we already use hydrogen in our steel mills for bespoke uses. So we have the experience in managing hydrogen and using it. So we're excited about the possibilities.
And I think we have one last question back in the middle there. Sir, yes.
Hi, Chris Cooper with CRS, Center for Resource Solutions. This conference is well titled because all this week I've heard a number of stories of leaders and within industries, people who are the champions of clean energy. And in your case, you spoke a little bit about how you moved from the legal department into sustainability and are now the executive vice president for it in your field, and you're seeing all these changes. I'm wondering if you could talk more about how you got there. How did these champions get to where they are, where they can make a real difference the way you are? What was your story?
So thanks for the question. So how did I get here? 20 years ago, walked into Cliffs and said, how hard can this be? They take rock out of the ground and sell it to the steel mills, right? Cliffs is who it is today because of vision and strategic leadership. We've had to make a lot of tough decisions over the 20 years I've been there, to admit we had a strategy wrong, to grow beyond where we could. So it took the fortitude and frankly the vision of our CEO, Lorenzo Gonzalez. He came in through a proxy battle and said, you guys got it wrong. And I was fortunate to have that prior experience, but then when Lorenzo came in and gave us that strategic vision, we really got our house in order, focused on getting that balance sheet in order, and it's all sort of the pieces have fallen into place to lead us to where we are today. So it takes a team. It takes a team full of a variety of talents. Lorenzo had steel in his blood from his days in Brazil, and saw the opportunity, and we all just really, frankly, rolled up our sleeves and worked to make it happen. And he has also been on the forefront of saying climate change is real, and our manufacturing facilities have a role to play in it. So we've always had that in mind, and we own up to the important role we do play in having to do things the right way and comply with the laws that exist and protect, human health and the health of the environment. We take it very seriously, and we'll continue to do so and ingrain that in all of our employees, that comes first and foremost. Safety comes first, and if there's an environmental concern, everybody has the ability to stop, to make sure we prevent anything from going wrong. So I think it's that vision, it's that belief, and a willingness to say we got it wrong, but then right the boat and everybody move in the same direction.
Tracy, thank you so much for your leadership, and thank you for being here with us today.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
All right, and I'm inviting the next panel up, which is going to be moderated by Snuler Price. Snuler?
While we get settled in up here, I'm just wondering if everybody would like to stand up for just 1 minute and stretch out. We're going to get comfortable up here. I know it's we're almost done. It feels good to move around. I might stand for just a second because I need to. As Amy said, my name is Snula Price. It's really my pleasure to be able to moderate this last panel. I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves in a second. But just briefly, this is my first year on the board of the Climate Registry, and it's really been my pleasure, and I'm really proud to be part of such an organization. It's, among other things, given me an opportunity to be here with you all in this really amazing conference. I've had so many great conversations over the days, and in this panel, we're going to try to pull on some threads that we've heard from across the conference to hopefully bring things together. My other hat that I wear, I am a senior partner at Energy and Environmental Economics, or E3, where, among other things, work on energy transitions. And so on this panel, it's really my pleasure to be able to talk about energy leadership and some of the transitions that we see and how we really are bending the curve here in the US and globally towards cleaner energy. So with that, let me we'll go down the panel and introduce ourselves.
Thanks so much, Sue. That's a great introduction, and it's great to be here. So my name's Caitlin Pritchard. I work at the Embassy of Canada, where I'm our lead on climate and clean energy issues. And the way I usually describe my role, because it's not always clear to everyone kind of what that means, is I'm responsible for reporting, engaging, connecting. So I do a lot of tracking legislation and trends and things that are happening in the US, primarily with a focus at the federal level, and helping the Canadian federal government and provinces and territories understand, what that means in terms of the impact on Canada. I do a lot of engagement with lawmakers, policymakers, regulators on different pieces of legislation and rulemakings that are coming forward that, again, have an impact on Canada. And then I do a lot of helping connect the Canadian federal government with folks in the US government and helping them navigate that. So a lot of work on the IRA and bipartisan infrastructure law and all of that stuff. A lot of stuff working with the US in terms of aligning our climate targets and cooperation on various clean energy initiatives. So thanks.
Fantastic.
All right. Yes, I'm Bobby Boyce. I'm with the U.S. Department of Energy with the newly formed Office of Community Engagement. That office was newly formed by the Biden and Harris administration because of the IRA and the bill funding that we were given here at the Department of Energy of about $100 billion for a lot of the programming and things of that nature to move forward with this clean energy transition. I was employee number 1 at the Office of Community Engagement, and we're really looking at trying to engage with these communities that we have not funded in the past. A lot of our funding went to academia and research and development, and we're changing that up right now to be able to fund alternate industries in regards to helping us all get to that finish line of creating a clean economy, clean energy economy. So My goal is to make sure we're connecting with these communities, make sure these industries, these organizations, make sure they're aware of these opportunities that we have coming out of a Department of Energy, and making sure that we're maybe helping them collaborate or connect with other industries or partners in their area as well that they're not aware of, to be able to move forward with this work, because not one industry or one individual can be able to really create that transition that we all are looking at creating. We all need to work together in unison, so I'm here to try to be that connector, be that matchmaker in that capacity. It's 5 of us right now covering the entire United States. I cover the Midwest region and the Mid-Atlantic and Appalachia region as well, newly. So I will be the point of contact for individuals that are looking for trying to get connected with DOE opportunities and finding out which ways that we can maybe help fund your projects or ideas that you have as well. So that's my role there.
Hi, I'm Tanya Peacock, and I lead the hydrogen practice for eco-engineers and also the broader sustainability practice. And I'm also board chair for the California Hydrogen Business Council. So Tracy, I loved hearing about how Cleveland Cliffs is thinking about hydrogen. Eco-Engineers is an environmental consulting and auditing firm. So we help clients set net zero and sustainability goals, develop a plan to achieve them. We help clients get their clean energy projects built by identifying available credits and incentives and helping them access those. And then we also develop methodologies for the voluntary carbon market to help carbon removal and carbon reduction projects get built through the creation of offsets and insets. And then on the other side, we have an auditing and verification team, and so we can do GHG scope emissions verifications. We do the verification for any type of the transportation regulatory programs like the Renewable Fuel Standard and the Low Carbon Fuel Standard in California and other states. And then we also can do the IRA credit verifications. Like we've been doing a lot of 45V and 45Q verifications. So that's Eco-Engineers.
Great, great. Caitlin, Bobby, Tanya, thank you all for participating in the panel and talking about energy leadership. I thought I would start by just a few remarks around the energy transition and leadership to bring in our whole panel, but I'm actually hoping the entire room can see themselves somewhere in this energy transition. I think that it's not really one transition that is underway, but at least 4 simultaneous energy transitions that are happening in the US and abroad. And I want to just sort of run through them again, hoping everybody can see, whether you're a data scientist, whether you're a community engagement specialist, wherever you sit, I'm hoping that you can see yourself and we can leave this conference with the idea that it's happening and I'm an important part of making it happen. The first transition that I think is well underway is decarbonizing the electric grid. We're at a point now where if you look at the sort of federal greenhouse gas, we're really bending that curve. The economics, if you are a utility and you do a resource plan as an electric utility, your lowest cost options for new energy are going to be renewables. And that's working. We're seeing just a huge success. I think it's like high marks for sure. And we have a lot of federal investment and through our tax credits and other things to have kind of created that. It's a project that we've been working on for a long time. The second energy transition that is underway and is making incredible progress is in electric vehicles. And the technology in the cars is amazing. The efficiency of an electric drivetrain is amazing. There are some bumps in the road, so to speak. The charging infrastructure is not all there for all the cars that we need. There are some questions about consumer adoption. There are some pieces to work on, but again, we're seeing that curve bend towards electric vehicles. The third energy transition that is underway that I see, and I know there are a number of folks in this room working on this, is in buildings and in the built environment. And one of our biggest challenges is, and an area I've been working on, is retrofitting buildings to be less carbon intensive. And that, I will be honest, is tough. It looks right now like millions of bespoke, custom engineered solutions to go into buildings, millions of buildings across the US and the world, to retrofit our systems. But we are making progress. There are, again, big federal support in buildings in the built environment, and when we build new buildings, it's much easier to decarbonize. And then the last energy transition that I wanted to touch on, and we just heard from Cleveland Cliffs, is around industry. In particular, we're seeing a lot of focus, and the federal government is investing in hydrogen hubs around hydrogen and how we can use it within our industrial process, be competitive, increase domestic manufacturing, jobs, and investment in our community through that pathway. So hopefully everybody sees themselves somewhere along that chain, maybe across all of that, in delivering those energy transitions. And I wanted to open up to the panel for just any reactions to that, and what are we missing?
Yeah, I mean, I really like the way you frame that. You sort of where we live, how we move, what we make, how we move, like I think, and then sort of how we power it all. The only thing I might build on that is just on the transportation. I think EVs are a really significant part of that, but I would even take it bigger than that. I would say sort of transportation writ large, I think is a big transition. You know, whether we're talking about kind of heavy duty trucking and maybe moving to fuel cell vehicles and that, whether we're talking about electric rail, whether we're talking about sustainable aviation fuel, I think, you know, transportation as a whole needs to decarbonize, and I think there's going to be a whole suite of technologies that enable us to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Other reactions to that?
A key, and something else that we also have to focus on doing is decarbonizing a lot of our sectors such as chemicals and plastic.
Yeah.
And you know, we've been talking about Scope 3 emissions in particular across the course of this conference, really focusing on how we can identify where the hotspots are and technologies and approaches to reducing carbon emissions.
Great.
Throughout the supply chain.
So I had a few questions just based on backgrounds of everyone to sort of pull in, and maybe I thought I'd start with you, Tanya, around just what role can low carbon hydrogen play in the energy transition?
Sure, and I know you had a question, Snoo, like everybody wants to produce it, but is there really demand, right?
Yeah.
So I'll add that for you.
That's right.
So I'll start with, I had the opportunity to participate in the National Petroleum Council hydrogen study. So the Secretary of Energy asked the National Petroleum Council to look at the current state of what it would take to actually scale and reduce the cost of low carbon intensity hydrogen. So the study looked at, what's the role for hydrogen in a net zero economy, what kind of policies are needed to get there, what does the market look like, and what infrastructure is needed, and what's needed to actually ensure demand. So the study was also, it was actually a very multi-sector study. Of course, it was the members of the National Petroleum Council, a lot of the big integrated energy companies, otherwise known as oil companies, and also some environmental groups and a lot of participation from agencies as well, so and universities. So a lot of the modeling was done by MIT. And so just a few of the findings from that were that 8% so low carbon intensity hydrogen could account for up to 8% of US emissions reductions, and particularly in the hard to abate sectors that we've been talking about, industry, heavy duty transportation, even power generation, and that not using low carbon intensity hydrogen is a more expensive pathway to achieve those reductions. And the MIT modeling showed it like an additional 0.5% to 1% of GDP by 2050. And then the other thing that the study looked at, are the policies in place that we have sufficient to get to where we need to go to achieve these decarbonization goals? So it came out with like, the current policies would probably double hydrogen demand by 2030, but what we really need to do to catalyze a hydrogen economy and achieve decarbonization goals is about 7 times demand growth. And so what are the key policies needed to get there? The top policy recommendation in this study that again came out from the National Petroleum Council was an explicit price on carbon. And then the second and third were demand side incentives for industry and for transportation. So I just thought that, it's consistent with what we've been talking about is the need for carbon price signals in order to reduce carbon emissions. So what are the current sectors? So the other thing I want to say, so you have the existing uses of hydrogen, which are refining and petrochemicals for the most part today. There's some newer uses in heavy-duty transportation, in steel production, any industry with high process heat. And then there's also this use of hydrogen derivatives. So hydrogen for sustainable aviation fuel, hydrogen as a component to renewable diesel, hydrogen to green ammonia, to decarbonize fertilizer. So it's not just the pure use of hydrogen that's being looked at, but also how hydrogen can decarbonize these other sectors. So I could go on and on, but I'll stop there.
No, that's terrific. And around hydrogen, I've been hearing from a lot of folks who want to manufacture hydrogen, but less. I was aware of less of like people who actually want to use it at the end of the day. But this conference has really kind of given me more hope. We just heard from Cleveland-Cliffs and steel manufacturing. I think in the previous panel, SoCal Gas was talking about power generation in the LA Basin. It feels like maybe it's the logic model of federal funding to grow an industry supply, and that decarbonized energy will have a off-taker. So.
And of course, so you talk to producers, they say there isn't a market. You talk to buyers, you say there isn't supply, and the issue is price. So it's getting to that point where low carbon intensity hydrogen is at a price point that makes it viable. Yeah. And so that's really the challenge, and that's what DOE, and that's what Bill and IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act and bilateral infrastructure law, the hydrogen hubs, the $8 billion for 6 hubs, demonstrating the full hydrogen ecosystem. So there's a lot of work and a lot of money being poured towards this. Yeah. And I think that speaks just to how essential it is. Like we need clean molecules to decarbonize. We can do a lot with electrons, but we also need molecular energy. And so that is why hydrogen's so important. And it's also kind of the connector between all these different sectors.
It feels like the big federal investment gives us that scale, which gives us that innovation.
Yes.
And fingers crossed, the price hopefully follows.
Yes.
And it also seems like it takes advantage of the decarbonized electricity investments we've been doing for decades to get green hydrogen to run, or to green electricity to run, electrolysis to run, and create the hydrogen itself. So it sort of leverages that prior work.
Yes.
I wanted to switch gears a little bit, but talk about the green grid. And so I have a question for you, Caitlin. So Canada recently released its national GHG inventory report, which is, right in line with the Paris Agreement and a requirement there. What does it reveal about Canada in terms of its energy transition and the themes that we've been talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. So the National GHG Inventory Report has actually been produced annually since 1996 under the UNFCCC. The 2024 report recently came out with data that goes back to 2022, so we're always a few years behind. But I think it shows a few interesting things, in terms of kind of the energy transition. And I'll pull out some of the highlights, but then I want to drill down a little bit into what that means for energy. So as of 2022, we had 708 megatons of CO2 equivalent being released from Canada. That puts us at, I think, about the 11th largest global emitter in the world. So, smaller than some of the big ones, but enough to be significant and enough to make a difference. Since 2005, we've had a decrease of 54 megatons, so it's about 7.1% from those levels. And 2005 is important because that's our Paris baseline year, so that's why we use that as a reference. Our emissions intensity is down overall. So as of 2022, it's decreased 30% since 2005. And that's despite having a 21% population growth over the same period. So we're seeing a significant decline in emissions intensity. And I think the overall finding of the report is that we're on track to meet our NDC targets of 40 to 45% reduction below 2005 levels by 2030. So I think that's positive. Where it starts to get really interesting is I think when you drill down into some of the data that's in the report, it reveals some different things about where we're at in terms of the energy transition. So number one, we see that those reductions across the whole economy are primarily being driven by three main sectors. And those sectors are electricity, heavy industry, and waste, and then some other areas. And so on the electricity front, we've seen a 22% reduction, primarily due to a shift away from fossil fuels. On the heavy industry, so we're looking mostly at steel, aluminum, chemicals manufacturing, some of that has been driven by technological improvements that have been put in place, some fuel shifting, that kind of thing. Some of it's been driven by closures of facilities too. So there's a good news story in terms of overall emissions, but then it comes back to that, emissions versus economy, how do we kind of balance that? Yeah. And so I think it's interesting. I think it shows just how difficult that nut to crack really can be. Where we still see some challenges, though, coming out of the data in the report are in sectors like oil and gas, in agriculture, in buildings. So again, going back to your framework, right, and kind of looking at that, there are still areas where we see challenges in terms of actually being able to reduce emissions and where we need to do a little bit more on that. Interestingly, to the point about transport, which we were talking about previously, in 2021, we were actually below 2005 levels in terms of transport. And that's despite there being more vehicles on the road, driving fewer kilometers or fewer miles. And we're starting to see an increase again. So some of that is probably related to post-pandemic, the economy getting running again. But there have been significant decreases due to economic energy efficiencies and stuff in vehicles. So I think that is interesting and shows that even when we are kind of sometimes on a downward trajectory, we still need to be very careful on that. I'll maybe just say a word because you had brought up sort of carbon pricing, and it made me think too about where we're looking at going in terms of how to tackle some of these difficult sectors. And so just really quickly, a price on carbon has actually been one of the main ways that the Canadian federal government has attempted to do this. And I will say, like the US government, when it comes to reducing emissions, we're looking at sort of carrots and sticks. So what is the regulation we can put in place? What are the financial incentives? And the price on carbon has been a really key piece. We've had one at a federal level since 2020, and the federal price on carbon functions as a backstop. So provinces and territories can do more, but they cannot do less than that. So we currently have a price on carbon. It sits at about $80 a ton. It started out at 15. It's going to go up to 170 a ton by 2030. And so that is sort of sending, I think, a very important market signal in terms of where the economy needs to go to make this energy transition possible. But we also have in place right now, we've released draft oil and gas methane regulations. So Canada is had signed on to the US Global Methane Pledge, which commits countries to reduce their methane emissions by 30% below 2020 levels by 2030. We've actually gone farther in terms of our oil and gas targets, committing to reduce them by 75% below 2012 levels by 2030. It's the first country in the world to do that. So the oil and gas methane regulations are designed to kind of help move us in the direction of the Global Methane Pledge and our own commitments. And then we also have a proposed oil and gas emissions cap, which is being put on that and is currently under discussion. So those are some of the regulatory pieces. On the financing side of things, very similar to what the U.S. is doing, we have hydrogen investment tax credits, we have clean tech tax credits, we have EV supply chain tax credits that are designed to kind of push people more in that direction. Mm-hmm. And we also have things like an $8 billion net zero accelerator, which is really designed to help heavy industry move toward cleaner forms through grants and loans and that type of thing. So. Anyway, I'll stop there, but that's sort of a picture of where we're at.
I mean, that's fantastic, good news, and you're bending the curve, and it's working across all of these different sectors. And then also, obviously, Canada is not an island relative to the United States, and there's a lot of interaction on the grid, on manufacturing, automotive. So, it's a great opportunity for partnership.
Absolutely.
So, Bobby, we've been talking a lot about federal funding and the Department of Energy, and so, with the influx of funding and opportunities through bipartisan infrastructure law, through the Inflation Reduction Act, what has that done to DOE, and give us a day in the life, or tell us how that's changed the DOE organization.
Well, with that influx of money, it's about close to $100 billion that was given directly to DOE in regards to helping move forward with this type of work. And it's really, like I said a little bit earlier, it really transitioned the way that we created funding opportunities and grant opportunities to be able to hopefully touch and help facilitate every industry that wants to be part of this work that we're doing for this clean energy transition. One thing I usually like to say as a hip-hop pioneer, as Too Short says, you get in where you fit in. So find out if there's an opportunity that fits what you're doing with this clean energy transition, and I'm sure we have a funding opportunity that matches that to help you move forward with that. So that's one great thing that I love with my job is we have the money. So if you have an idea, you're innovative, if you have a collaboration or a region that wants to move forward with this work, we can help you move forward with that project, that plan, that idea that you have. And if you have an innovative idea, we'd love to hear those. I mean, with hydrogen being a big thing now and figuring out how can we make that more affordable and how can we really move forward with that type of technology. We'd love to find individuals that are working towards that to make it affordable to do that. So. But yeah, day in life, we connect with almost any and all industries. We're heavily changing up new and creating new funding opportunities for new industries. I'm continuously going out in the community, finding out what challenges that they are, what challenges the industries in regards to getting this funding to move forward some of these projects that may have been sitting by the bayside because it is expensive work. To do this work is not cheap. Solar panels and water technology and all the above is very, very expensive. So. I want to find out ways that we can maybe make that connection to make sure that we can continue to do this work and do this work successfully as well.
I really appreciate what you just said about your approach of, it's not just the DOE wants to do this, it's also what does a community need, and we can bring support to that effort. I think we heard something similar from Cleveland Cliffs about the interview process. And that the federal government really is invested in trying to get solutions that work and that fit the need of the recipients of the funding.
And historically, it has been. We have this black eye of saying that federal funding's a huge challenge to really navigate getting funds. I mean, there's a lot of deliverables and outcomes and accounting measures and lawyer negotiation aspects of it that can take forever as well. So we've been trying to change that trajectory as well and making them a little more simpler, making an easier process for not just our normal companies that usually get our funding, but for new opportunities, new companies to be able to also obtain this funding as well. Because we know this isn't going to change with just one organization. This takes a community to do this. And a lot of times, the awardees subgrant the awards to individuals on the ground floor really doing the work, whether it's 501c3s or for-profit organizations or academia, whatever it may be. So why not get the funds directly to those organizations now and getting past all of that fluff to actually be able to really create an impact almost immediately.
Thank you for that. Now I'd like to pull on another thread that's sort of been weaving through this conference, which is Scope 3 emissions, and ask you, Tanya, identifying, quantifying Scope 3 emissions is kind of a daunting task. My head is spinning. I'm still learning a lot about Scope 3. What can be done to increase supply chain transparency, reduce uncertainty, make good quality data available to, make progress?
It's a great question because I think we're all grappling with that because of the complexity, and there have been a number of great discussions about this throughout the conference. And some of the themes I've really heard are the need for collaboration. So if you have a complex supply chain, you need your suppliers to collaborate in providing the data to you. You need some confidence in the integrity of the data that they're providing, and that it's going to be somewhat consistent in terms of what's reported and how it's reported and measured. And you also need, a lot of companies clearly, you don't, if you're reporting to numerous registries or different programs, you don't want each one to be a little bit different because it just adds a lot of cost and complexity. So the challenge really we all have is how do you make sure that there's integrity in the data, it is verifiable, and the costs aren't astronomical. And so some of the themes that we've really been hearing are if you can start to, maybe if some key industry sectors get together and agree on protocols for, for measuring, for collecting and measuring and reporting data, that can take out some of the, just adds more certainty and transparency. So rather than just pull down menus with emissions factors on emissions reporting software, the footnotes would take you back to an actual protocol that's been consistently applied. So I think that's, that's going to be the challenge collectively, and particularly as we see this change from voluntary reporting to mandatory reporting. So as California begins implementing its GHG reporting requirement that it includes scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, the scope 3 part, and they're going to start developing the regulation, implementing regulations in July is the latest I've heard. So that it's going to have to be I'm sure it will be a collaborative, interactive process where industry and regulated policymakers and stakeholders work together to come up with workable regulations, and part of that can be kind of industry-specific protocols that create some consistency and allow collaboration. So those are some initial thoughts, but really reflecting themes I've heard throughout this conference.
One of the things that you just said helps me calm down a little bit about scope 3, which is to dividing the problem into sectors and really identifying those that are most important, working on, and then your problem is somehow much more focused. And then it's absolutely possible to create protocol to, and best practices for and standardization of
Yes.
data quality within a sector, and then we can inch outwards, including more and more sectors over time, so that we can feel confident in those estimations to sort of chunk up the problem, I guess.
Yes.
Okay, I spoke earlier about decarbonizing the electricity grid, and so I wanted to ask you, Caitlin, with our trade relationship with Canada about that, because since we are an integrated grid, and Canada has a transition underway, the U.S. has a transition underway. So is Canada facing some of the same challenges the U.S. is when it comes to decarbonizing the grid? Same successes, and what should we be thinking about there?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think in some ways our challenges are a little bit different. So our electricity mix is already over 80% non-emitting, and that's primarily because we are blessed with abundant hydroelectricity. We also have some nuclear, so about 61% hydro, 13% nuclear, and then a growing portion of sort of wind, solar. So only about 17% of ours is sort of fossil fuel related versus I think about 60% in the US. So in some regards, we don't have the same challenges, but I will say there's a number of places where I think we do. I mean, we will still need massive growth in generation to be able to complete the energy transition and as our economy grows. We have a net zero by 2035 target for our electricity sector, and I have seen reports that say that basically from now through 2050, we need to be building 10 gigawatts of new generation facilities every year. That's 6 times faster than we have built for the last decade. So that's a lot. Closely related to that is the issue of permitting, which is, sexy, hot topic here in the electricity community, I know. But, we have a lot of the same challenges in terms of multiple levels of approval, in terms of the time that it takes, the very important need to do appropriate environmental reviews and all of that stuff. So, we're watching very closely some of the discussions around permitting reform here in the US because I think we face very similar challenges. And then I think there's a challenge of sort of interconnectivity, which is also, a very common theme in a lot of discussions down here when we're talking about interregional transfer capacity and how connected our different regions are. Quick lesson in Canadian federalism, our natural resources belong to the provinces in Canada. They do not belong to the federal government. And so what that means is that we actually have a really well integrated grid north-south. A lot of provinces have connections to the US. We are less well integrated east-west in many respects. And so when we're talking about sort of how we meet this moment and how we move forward in an energy transition, thinking about what that means in terms of interconnectivity, I think we're having a lot of the same conversations that you're having down here. But I think this also opens up some opportunities. And I come back to the theme of partnerships, which I think has been a real theme throughout this. I mean, we have 35 major transmission lines that cross the border with the US. A lot of people don't know that. Even less well known is that we actually have 86 transmission lines. So a lot of those are really tiny lines that are connecting communities, less than a mile long across the border. So there are US communities that are connected through the grid to Canada. And I think that just really speaks to how well integrated our two countries are. And a lot of those lines are bidirectional, right? So the energy can flow to Canada when we need it during the winter season, and we can send power back down south when it's during the summer months when there's more air conditioning being run in the US. So I think there are opportunities there to kind of explore how we can further connect the Canadian and US grids and kind of ensure better affordability, reliability, and security of our grid writ large. I just want to highlight one project that I think really speaks to kind of how this interconnectivity can work really well. Some people may know the Champlain Hudson Power Express, which is a project that connects Quebec to New York City, broke ground in New York City last fall. And it's a 339-mile line when it's complete that will bring a 1,250 megawatt line that's going to bring clean power from Quebec down to New York City every year. The converter station for this is actually being built on a remediated peaker plant site in an environmental justice community in Astoria, Queens. So I think there's a really good component there of kind of community engagement and environmental justice. But when the line is complete, the CO2 emission savings from that are going to be the equivalent of taking 44% of the cars off New York City streets. And this line alone is expected to be able to deliver 20% of the generation needed for New York State to be able to reach its renewable energy targets. So I think just in that, there's some really good examples of partnership already between Canada and the US and ways that we can continue to partner on that. I'll note that DOE actually released just a couple weeks ago its preliminary list of 10 national interest electric transmission corridors. One of those in the Mid-Atlantic region would connect Ontario to Pennsylvania, just up Lake Erie, and is another good example of just how, if we can integrate better, we can ensure, as I say, those affordability, those reliability benefits for everybody.
That's amazing. And I know that US FERC has just recently changed some rules around transmission in the US to also create more opportunity for transmission lines and interconnectedness to get our renewables online and from higher value resource zones to the cities and all the way to New York City, like Queens is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not just to the city. That's like that's
Absolutely.
like right into the city. Bobby, I wanted to ask you a question around sort of cities and your engagement with them, and there are challenges. There's some challenges, and I'm curious what DOE's approach is when you're approaching cities that maybe aren't thinking clean energy, who aren't really trying to lead the cusp of a clean energy revolution, and how do you go about that? How do you approach that in your work?
Yeah, good question. And like I said, I cover 20 states, so I run across this challenge all the time. And especially with some of my states, the state government doesn't really support this type of work. So how do you really support the municipalities within those states that really want to do the work, yet they don't have the backing of their state? So we another portion of my job is to make sure that we're analyzing a lot of our grant and funding opportunities and bringing back data and information to be able to make it more efficient and effective funding opportunity for all. We found out ways to get funding directly to local municipalities, bypassing the states that don't support that as well, to make sure that the work is still being done in those areas. We sometimes run across a challenge where states are definitely going to give back the money, formula funding, and say we don't want any of your federal dollars. But then who's really suffering is those municipalities that really want to do the work. So it's imperative for us to bring back that data, have those conversations, create opportunities to support the individuals, communities, and the foundations, the organizations, whatever it may be, that wants to do the work in those states. Even without the support of the larger government in that aspect as well. So that's one great thing that I do love, that at the federal level we can do that in some way or another, and really create that change that we all know is needed, and finding creative solutions and ways to bypass that aspect. So.
Fantastic. I am gonna just want to dig in a little bit more on, I think one of the key things is our federal funding, the money, and so I want to ask a broad question about that and what's important. And I also want to open it up for questions for our great panelists in just a minute. But let me ask a question while people think about where they want to go with their question. And that is, we are making a big investment through these, bipartisan infrastructure law, the IRA. When you add it up, it's over $1 trillion of investment. We heard Bob talk earlier. It's sort of an unprecedented amount of rejuvenation in the energy ecosystem. And for energy leadership, we need to get it right. And so what I really, I think it would be interesting to hear from the panelists, sort of what's important that we do to get it right, and to help us really, win the day, have wind in our backs for our energy transition. And anybody throwing it out for anybody?
I'm happy to jump in
Great.
there. So, we've talked a lot about partnerships, and I'll say I think if the last 3 days, if my takeaway from the last 3 days is probably going to be about the importance of innovation, data, and partnerships, like that I think is really my takeaway from this. So I'll put in a plug for partnerships because of where I sit. Yep. I think we're at a really interesting moment right now where with the troika of bills that have been passed, the bipartisan infrastructure law, CHIPS and Science Act, IRA, that as industrial policy for the US has the potential to be transformative over the next 20, 30, 50 years. But there's that saying, right, that if you want to go fast, go it alone. If you want to go far, go together. And unfortunately, when it comes to climate, we need to go quickly, but we also need to do it in partnership with everyone. And so, my plea, I guess, would be not to forget about partners and allies like Canada and others who are ready to be partners in this energy transition and who want to work with, the federal government, with states, with municipalities to figure out how we can do this. I talked about the benefits of cross-border electricity. I haven't even sort of touched upon in the context of critical minerals. But in Canada, we have all of the critical minerals necessary to make EV batteries. Unfortunately, under the IRA, Canadian-made battery components count toward those tax credits, I think, in an example of how integrated our auto sector is, particularly around the Great Lakes region here. But we've invested in EV plants about almost $30 billion over the last year in terms of building out EV plants that can help support the North American auto industry. And so I think as we're thinking about how to decarbonize transportation in buildings and electricity, I think it's important for us to be thinking about the whole value chain and how we can integrate that in a way that supports the clean energy goals and grows our economy and, brings back that friendshoring, and I don't know if I love that term, but really tries to bring things back toward looking not just at the U.S., where I think it's important that you all are building out manufacturing, but thinks about how we can use the broader North American relationship to really meet those joint goals. So that's my pitch.
I like it, partnership.
And one thing I would just add a little bit to like partnerships as well is, yes, we have a lot of funding we're trying to give out from the federal level, but please think about how to collaborate, how to become regional partners with each other, because with these funds that we have, we want to create the largest amount of impact as possible. We really want to scale these innovative ideas and these projects. So if there's ways that you all can work together, partnership, collaborate is a big factor in that. One example, I would say we have a Renew America Schools program. On the first round of that, we gave away 20 awards, and we had 2,500 applications. So we realized that was a huge challenge, it was a huge need, and we were not ready for that yet. So we came out with a second round of that right now. We're giving away another 30 awards as well, but I try to tell a lot of these organizations is if you all can apply for an award for maybe 50 schools or maybe 100 schools can all work together and get that funding. Therefore, it's only one award, but yet it impacts 50 schools. So then you kind of multiply in that aspect. So we want to make sure that we are as impactful as possible, but we need individuals to, I guess, play nice sometimes. And I understand in this work, a lot of individuals work in silos and are trying to create that transformational change. But if we can change that mindset and start being more collaborative, that would be very helpful to really be able to create that long-lasting and huge impact that we're looking at.
And I would just add that community benefits are so key to all these projects, and we heard some great stories this morning about how communities are benefiting from this funding in terms of jobs and a cleaner environment. And just the plea for education to make sure that there's awareness about what the funding is accomplishing and can accomplish is going to be absolutely key. And so that's from schools to community-wide, and however we can make sure that the benefits are part of the plan, and the Inflation Reduction Act did a great job of that to get the full benefit of a lot of these tax credits. There have to be the prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements to make sure that we are training the next generation of workers or retraining workers into clean energy fields. So, I mean, it's just, the design was such that I think will make sure that, helps ensure that there are a lot of community benefits, but we do have to get the word out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Justice 40
Justice
lens
40.
And like your approach, Bobby, just from our conversations about making sure all communities are participating in the program.
The hydrogen hubs have a strong
Hydrogen
community engagement part. I know the Arches Hub has been engaging the community from the beginning, particularly in the Port of LA area, because the port communities are so tired of people coming with projects after, like, here's our project, we already planned it, hope it's okay, here's a few dollars for some schools and boys and girls clubs, and they're taking like from the beginning, you can be part of understanding what this project is, why it's important, opportunities for you to participate in all different kinds of ways. And so I think it's a really great example of the funding requiring the engagement, and then the project really taking that seriously and doing a great job.
Fantastic. We do have time for a question or two. Maybe, is there a microphone right here in front, Diane?
Hi, I'm Diane Wittenberg from the Climate Registry. So my question is for Bobby. Of the $1 billion you talked about, how much is currently still uncommitted? And my second question is, are you funding, I'm not as familiar as I should be about this, Tanya referred to Scope 3, so that would be analysis, modeling kinds of projects, or are you basically looking for shovel-ready big job projects only?
So the first part of your question, I don't know how much hasn't been allocated yet, to be honest. I could find that out for you. I mean, we're awarding individuals on a regular basis. Almost every day we're having some type of announcement in regards of funding that's going out the door. So it's a moving target at all times. And we're about 600 opportunities deep right now. We're coming out with 20 to 30 every week about opportunities that are coming down the pipeline as well. So we're moving at a rapid pace. So it's kind of hard to put a number on that because it'll be different by next week, a huge difference by next week. And we're funding not just shovel-ready opportunities, but even, like I said, we still fund research and development as well. We still fund workforce development in regards to new technologies that are coming out the pipeline to get the new technology and having people offering new jobs and things of that nature as well. So we fund a little bit of everything. It all depends on, I mean, your concept paper, if it makes sense and how beneficial it can be. So.
Thanks. I think we are probably due to wrap it up and get everyone on. I feel like this panel has been an opportunity to sort of pull on a lot of different threads. What are the major energy transitions? What is the importance of partnerships, both public-private partnerships, federal government to businesses to local government, partnerships with our Canadian partners, and an investment in communities. We talked about the critical role of industry, hydrogen. We're here in Cleveland. I feel like it was perfect to sort of sit after the Cleveland Cliffs and like get that real life example of investment on the ground and just one more example of bending the curve and our success in energy transition. So thank you, panelists, and thank you all for sticking with us and really a wonderful conference.